And the idea in the radical approach is to transform Blacks' attitudes towards themselves. And there you see Asa Hilliard that I referred to before. So of these three different branches, again, I would argue that Lincoln has been firmly embedded within the traditional. So seeing kind of like what was happening with Black psychology on the national scene, I want to go back then to Lincoln and talk about what was happening right when the psychology major was established then, the Department of Psychology, 1967. There were three professors, as you can see listed there in the bulletin, including Professor Johnson, Ted Bryant, and Gerald Downey. It's stunning when I look at the courses required for the major. These are the same classes we have today, pretty much. Since this time, I think that I know I have added a introduction to psychotherapy class, and Dr. Holman has introduced a class on sports psychology. But we have this special topics class that other areas that psychologists want to cover typically goes into a special topics area. So this is really what the major has looked like for a long time. So since Ted was one of the first people actually to represent the psychology major at Lincoln, I want to say a little bit about him, and I wanted to shift it to a video here in just a moment, if I can get the video to work. He was a graduate of Pepperdine University in clinical psychology in 1959. He became director of clinical psych at State Hospital in Lima, Ohio. And then he and his family moved to Lincoln in 1962. And in some ways, like I think I mentioned earlier, this could be called not only does psychology find a home at Lincoln University, the Bryants find a home at Lincoln University, because every member of the Bryant family ended up working at Lincoln University at some point. The stories I have been able to collect from the people I've spoken to about this man are just incredible. I wish we had footage of him. He was coordinator of testing, director of counseling and testing. He was director of institutional research. All the time, while he was director of these different offices, he was teaching 2 to 5 classes a year in psychology. He published research with Bill Benecke on the California Personality Inventory and obesity. The Missouri State Police reached out to him to create an assessment because they recognized that their instruments were not admitting or allowing enough Black officers. And so he helped create an assessment that would change their policies, basically. He conducted free assessments for school kids in Jefferson City. At Highway 54 Church of Christ, he was an community ombudsman, and he led songs there. Also, just as a colleague, he cared deeply about the people that he worked with. Dr. Holland shared a story with me about how one of the other psychology professors had basically fallen ill and was not functioning very well, but the administration could not basically help him out with getting on disability and getting the help that he needed. But when Dr. Holland turned to Ted, Ted was able to, with his kind and counseling type demeanor, really forge a connection with empathy and get the man help that he needed and have him connect with his family. Actually, he was able to go back to his family in St. Louis. If you look at some of these quotes that I've collected about Ted Bryant, said Ted was low-keyed, caring about students and fellow faculty members. His common sense was very good, and Ted was very thoughtful. That's from Tony Holland. Robert Hancock said, Ted exuded a peacefulness, a happy Buddha in his calmness. He was always pleasant and content. And Bill Benecke says, my recollection of Ted Bryant is that first and foremost, he had a remarkably calm, pleasant, and if you wish, even keeled approach to life. For me, he was also a valued source of feedback and strategies to best address problems and issues facing the psychology program. And then Patricia Rutledge wrote to me and said, when I knew Ted, I was a total newbie. She was brand new at Lincoln University. Ted was incredibly generous with me in terms of answering my frequent questions and offering his seasoned advice. I always count on him, which meant a great deal. When he retired, I missed his calm, thoughtful, and genuine presence. When he passed much too soon after his retirement, I felt a tremendous loss. So I think hopefully you'll get a sense of who this man was when he was at Lincoln University. And so this time I'd like to be able to share part of an interview that I had with Ithaca Bryant. And I may just have to click on that and see if that will open up. I had to open another screen, but I'm not sure if that, so let's see. This is gonna work.
Patience, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Patience.
Exactly. Hmm.
have probably isn't even there anymore.
Okay, so
That was
I'm
in
gonna forward it to,
1962 or 63.
let's see. There we go.
Director of counseling and testing.
There we go.
And then he went on to become the psychology professor. And then he became assistant professor, correct? Yes. And associate. Oh, and then
She's talking about her dad.
I always get that mixed up. I always say he was associate and then assistant, but assistant comes before associate. So then my mom, she was, she actually stayed to have my sister. She was born in 1970. And so that's telling her age. And so after that, she came up and she became the secretary for the president. And after the secretary for the president, she went on to become somebody in student accounts and help the students there. And then she was in the budget office with Mr. Addison Williams. So the story I like telling about that is they worked long and hard to keep Lincoln University going. And I mean, long hours. Well, this one particular night, she worked from 8 in the morning until 11 at night. And what he likes to remind me, he actually retired, but every time he saw me after he retired, he reminded me that, you know, I remember when you were standing on the porch with that baseball bat and you said, don't you ever bring my mother home that late again. And I'm like, I don't really remember that, but okay. And so, oh, and my brother, he worked in the Lincoln University bookstore. And my sister, she worked in the cashier's office, helping the students, you know, with their student counts and things. And the students were very patient because they had a bell so that whenever she was not there at the desk, they could go bing, 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 bing. Well, some of them were smart Alex and they go bing, 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 bing while she was sitting there at the desk. And she said, I finally got tired of that. And so she didn't work there very long. But me, I work here in the library. And I like to tell people if I had, you know, the time that I started as a student, along with the years that I were here at the library, I would be retired by now. But I started in 1979 as a student. And my dad said, you know, the best place to have a job, nice and quiet, would probably be the library. And so Mrs. Freddie Ashford, she was a friend that, you know, because my dad probably knew everybody. And so she was a friend. And so he said, can my daughter have a job? She said, yeah, sure. Have her come on down and, you know, try out. And so I did. They liked me. I got the job. And I've been here ever since. What happened for me to get the job here is that Miss Catherine Long, she was my supervisor. Well, she became the acting librarian at the time. And so, because Mrs. Freddie Ashford had passed on. And so then Mrs. Dotha Black Bish, she was in the technical services area where I worked. She passed on. And so I got her job. Miss Long said, you know, this is way above your, you know, what you do, because I graduated with a degree in fashion merchandising. And she said that actually this is a high school diploma kind of job. She said, but you know what you're doing and you can hit the ground running. So she let me have it. And I've been here ever since.
That's great. Can you tell me what it was like for you as an undergraduate student?
Me as an undergraduate student, let me tell you. Well, I went to school, since I was here in 1962, I went to school in Jefferson City. And I was not like the other kids, and they got to have a car, you know, as soon as they got to be 16. Well, my parents were very kind to me. They got a house that was situated in all the school areas. So I got to walk uphill to Thorpe Gordon. Then I got to walk uphill to the middle school. Then I got to walk uphill to the high school. And then I got to walk uphill to Lincoln University. So I got to walk up lots of hills, but to tell you all about that, what happened was, I was mostly the only Black person in my, class. And so, there's nobody else that looked like me. And I was like, okay. But then I got to Lincoln University. Oh my goodness. I mean, it was a total culture change. I mean, there was Black people everywhere. I had Black people as teachers. I mean, this was so cool. I was like, oh, I've died and gone to Nirvana. It's like, oh, it was so neat. But you know what? I didn't really immerse myself in college life because I lived at home. I could walk uphill and go home. So I didn't immerse myself that much in college life.
Did you hear anything from your classmates about your dad as a teacher?
Well, the one thing I heard about my dad was, you cannot take me. I was like, why not? And he said, because they'll think that I gave you the job, the grade that you got. And so I'm like, okay, fine. So I never got to take my dad as a teacher, but my friend said that he was fabulous. He was so funny and he was really great as a teacher. And I'm like, what? He's not like that at home. He doesn't laugh and giggle at home. He's kind of stoic and reserved. And you say he laughs and giggles and carries on like that? I'm like, okay, I'll believe you. But they said he had some really wild stories. I said, about me? And they said, nah, not really about you. Kind of about you. I was like,
One last question. Can you tell me what you think about where Lincoln is now and its future from your perspective?
Where Lincoln is now. Well, sadly, we were in the paper the other day about Lincoln, declining in their enrollment. And I was like, but we also had COVID. And so that kind of hurt us there. But I'm hoping and praying that we come back because it is so cool I love telling the story about the soldiers. And you gotta show them that picture about the soldiers. But anyway, what happened was they gave their whole salary. Some of them gave their whole salary for a year to start this school. But they said, listen, Baxter, anyway, Richard, if this school doesn't start, you got to give us our money back, okay? And he said, yes, I will definitely do that. Well, it kept on going. And it's so cool that, one of the soldiers sent his daughters here and they actually graduated from this school. And so if they were here today, they would be so proud of this school and knowing how many people graduated with degrees and went on to be judges and lawyers and doctors and nurses. Oh, we have so many nurses. There's this one lady named Mary. I'll stop then. There's this one lady named Mary, and she came down where I was working in the media center. And she came down and she actually studied all the time. I mean, she would come in and get herself a study room and she would study. And that woman studied and studied and studied. And I said, one day, I said, Mary, if I ever get sick, I want you as my nurse. I said, because I know you know your stuff. And it's so cool. And, usually the nurses that graduate from Lincoln University are guaranteed a job, which is so cool to find out.
Are there any parting comments you'd like to share?
I want to thank you so much, Dr. DeBoard, for letting me do this and letting me carry on and stuff. And I'm hoping that people enjoy this and that they might learn more about psychology and that they might learn more about Lincoln University.
All right, and now I'm going to shift back to my PowerPoint if I can. Here we go. And these are some pictures. I love working with Ithaca, and she's so generous in sharing about her family. And you can see Ted and Clara there on the upper left. At the bottom is Ithaca with her dad after a church picnic. In the middle there, you see mom Clara and Ithaca with her brother Ted. And then on the right there, I like that picture because that's in their front yard with mom and sister Clara. You can see all the buildings of Lincoln back there. And Ithaca was telling me that on Roland Street where they lived, they had all sorts of Lincoln faculty there, including Mrs. Savage, who was an LU English teacher. Robert Mitchell's family was over there too, and B. Moore Smith, who was a home ec teacher, and Coach Reed all lived in that neighborhood, overlooking Lincoln University. Again, I just greatly appreciate how much Ithaca was willing to share with me about the Bryant family and their experience with Lincoln University. Currently, actually since 2008, these have been the faculty members at Lincoln University. And I have great colleagues. I love working with them. And I really, when you start thinking about the three branches of Black African psychology, I mentioned that we are more of the traditional sense, trying to use like traditional methodologies and psychological methods to critique all sorts of things. I can really say most about myself, obviously, and Dr. Argetti and I talk about teaching every day. And so I know that we regularly talk about issues of race and of social class and just social justice issues in all our classes. I mean, my social psychology classes, that's something we talk about every day. And so, but again, I would say that as a faculty, we're probably firmly entrenched in more of the traditional school of thought there. I also want to recognize that an influence in my life and my career has been Helen Neville. And she was a professor, mentor of mine at the University of Missouri when I was doing graduate school. She was in the African American Studies program and also in the counseling psych program that I graduated from. And she was co-founder and director of the Center for Multicultural Research, Training, and Consultation. She's now at University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. And I took her cultural diversity class. She challenged me consistently. One of the ways she had us do a project, and she's like, well, I mean, we need resources for gay and bisexual men on the University of Missouri campus. Why don't you start a support group for that? And because of that, I did. I ended up for 3 semesters running a support group that was just a drop-in group for gay and bisexual men there. And because of that, then that led me to make connections with peers, classmates, that eventually led to me being able to do what I consider to be probably my biggest contributions to psychology, would be co-editing these 3 books on counseling and psychotherapy with lesbian, gay, and transgender, bisexual people. And I've been able to work with authors on a national scale that's just been incredibly rewarding. Also, she challenged me to come out at Lincoln University. She goes, when I walk into a classroom, students know I'm Black, they see me as Black, and that's that. She goes, you know, you walk in, you're an invisible minority, and you get to hang on to some privilege if you come out right away. Based on her challenge, I came out during my job interview and I was hired. So I appreciate that from Lincoln University, but also I was hired in 1995. And so that was a scarier time to come out to students. I eventually started, I mean, now I come out all the time and I have for years, but it was her thought about that and the privilege that I was hanging on to that really made me think, and I talk about this in my classes too, about her challenge to me. These are the references I used in putting together this talk. And as I guess Dan Turner and Mike Downey say every morning on KJLU, that's all she wrote, the pencil broke. And thank you very much.
So thank you, Dr. DeBoer. This is everyone's opportunity to ask questions. If you could, please raise your hand. And either myself or Kurt will call on you, and Kurt will then answer your questions. And Kurt, you got several applause from audience members.
Oh, that's nice.
And Tatiana says, amazing job, so proud of you.
Thanks. Good to see everybody. I didn't know I couldn't see myself or anybody else during that whole time, so it's really unlike what I'm used to.
Dean McSwain says this was awesome.
Oh, thanks.